Hey everybody, this is Workforce Gaming. I'm Brad, along here with Doug.
Hi.
So, Inside, the biggest game from August, Xbox.
Yeah.
It's September 12th, so we're right on top of things here at Workforce Gaming.
Mhm.
Yeah, beginning of August came out on Xbox One, and then shocked the world when it was announced for end of August as a PS4 game, which of
Yeah,
course means that Doug jumped right on that right away.
I did.
So
Yeah, I thought this was an Xbox exclusive for a long time. I was really bummed. I was like, oh no. And then like as soon as it came out, they announced a PS4 version for like in like 3 weeks later.
yeah, it was really weird because this was like sitting there on my list. Like, oh, I got the Xbox One. This is like the first Xbox game I can get when it comes out that I really want to play. And then as I sat here and debated, I went, oh, or not. Guess I'll just wait three
Yeah.
weeks, which I still haven't bought it. But anyway, besides
Mhm.
the point. So I'm a big Limbo fan. Played Limbo a long
Yeah.
time ago when it first came out back on the 360. Played it again
Mhm.
on Vita or PS4. I don't know. Played through it a couple times. But anyway, so I'm really curious about this. In your experience with Limbo, you've played Limbo, right?
I did. I actually did not enjoy it a whole lot.
Interesting, because I feel like inside everything I've heard so far is that in Limbo, I feel like in everybody's discussion is kind of married together. Like you can't talk much about this without talking about Limbo.
Well, I think Limbo was a good. I think Limbo is a decent game. I think it's an okay game. I think it's a game that got a lot of press because it has a very interesting atmosphere, not
Yeah,
because it's necessarily a good game.
agreed.
Inside is a good game with a better atmosphere than Inside. Inside kind of felt like the prototype for this. Like it kind of felt like, I'm sorry, Limbo felt like the prototype for Inside, and Inside is kind of like that fully realized what they actually always wanted to do. Uh, yeah, I guess just like the final thing about like Limbo. Limbo kind of felt like a flash game from like an indie studio. It felt like from that time period, like oh, that's what an indie game. Limbo is an indie game. This feels like this would be hard to point and say this is an indie game because it is like one of like animation wise probably the best animation I've ever played in any game ever.
But that's an interesting comment because when you say
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't feel like an indie game. Indie games always have that feeling to me of okay, it's a little bit more of a condensed package. It's very artistic, and looking at this, that's what I see. So like you're saying, this has more in common with a bigger budget game, or you're just saying it kind of is so impressive that it almost supersedes that label.
I think it's kind of like Journey. I wouldn't call a an indie game. It's a smaller game. I wouldn't call it an indie game because there's such like a level of spit shine to it.
Gotcha. It doesn't have like the little like cracks in it where you can kind of fault and go, "Oh, this is really
Yeah,
artistic, but the gameplay's not there. The gameplay's really good, but the art style's a little weak." It's that
yeah,
total package.
yeah. I mean, I think that the not so nice word would be indie jank. It doesn't have any of that. No, no. It's such a very. It's very hard to talk about. It's I don't know if it's hard to talk about spoiling or not because I think Limbo. If you talk about Limbo, like what happened in Limbo, there's scenes you can pick out from Limbo. It's like, oh, that's Spider in Limbo, and there's a lot of amazing, amazing scenes in inside. But it's really hard to figure out like what exactly the story is trying to tell. And if you go, I mean, if you just like as soon as you beat the game, I don't think anybody's beating this game and go, oh, okay, that all made sense to me. That was great. Yeah, I got that. I understood everything that's going on.
Could write a
What you
three
will
sentence
get,
summary.
yeah. What you will get out of this game though is like as you're playing it, it has these some really really striking art in scenes that I haven't seen. I would say outside of like digital paintings. Do you know like sometimes like I don't know if you go online you'll see like oh this guy drew this really cool picture. You're like oh man that'd be cool to see in a video game, but that'd be cool to see in a movie. And you just never do. But this one does have those sort of things. It's this very it's not just Limbo was just dark and it kind of had spiders and it had like hotel symbols. This is dark, has some very odd sci-fi elements and
Ooh,
some very odd psychological horror.
ooh.
Um, to the point that I could not readily describe what I was seeing, which is kind of shocking because especially coming off Limbo, like you expect to see kind of familiar things, and this one just presents you with very unfamiliar settings, which is really cool because it almost more like a fantasy game.
Ooh.
The which I wasn't expecting. And fantasy isn't even, I don't even know if fantasy is the quite the right word. But it's this level of horror that you don't normally see in games. It's not disgusting. It's not. I mean, it's a little violent, but it's just so odd looking. Like the things that you see are just very unsettling.
Just
You can't even tell you why they're unsettling.
just more of that atmospheric, like what's going on. Just the whole environment of this is shocking. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like as opposed to like oh shit, there's something behind me.
Yeah, it's not like oh shit. It's like yeah, I think most horror is like oh shit, it's that monster thing. Oh shit, it's oh that's so gross. And this one's like what am I looking at? Something feel it's like this feels bad.
Oh, I like the sound of
But
that.
no, it's good. It's good, and it plays a lot on your expectations of the game because I think a lot of the media they released, which is very smartly so, um, kind of shows a pretty normal game. There's some very normal settings, and then it kind of gradually sort of ratchets up. And because it's a short game, it doesn't need to have sort of an ebb and flow. Like once the ball gets rolling, it keeps rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. Doesn't slow down. It's I don't know. I'm trying to think what else to talk about. It's just very atmospheric, very dark, some very very striking imagery. If you're just one of those people who likes beautiful games, this game it's gorgeous. It's amazing to look at. It has a really unique style where it's there's no textures. It's all flat shaded. They're just incredibly well animated. That like when you die, it hurts. I was actually playing with my girlfriend, and the game doesn't quite let on to how violent it is immediately. But there's a death scene pretty early on that like she screamed, like she's like, "Oh my god!" I jumped because I'm like, "Oh, this game's really violent." I didn't know that. So it's not like a gross humor, but it's like it is a vicious game. It is a vicious, surreal, horrifying, dark, dismal, beautiful mess of a game. But it's really strange playing a game with like this striking and this strange of art style with like really pitch perfect gameplay. Like it controls amazing. Like it controls way better than it should. Um, there's
Wait,
puzzles. I guess that's
I
important.
was gonna say this brings me to what do you do in this game? Like to what level? Because
Uh,
Limbo, pretty much you walked forward. There were some tricky puzzles, I guess. I can't think of any that I got stuck on. But like, what are you actually doing? Because everybody goes straight to the art, the atmosphere, the feeling. But the 3 hours, what are you doing for 3 hours?
it's the same thing, like just how you described Limbos. You're just moving forward through this environment, and you're doing some puzzles. And the puzzles, really, if you've played any 2D indie game like with
Yeah.
some puzzles in it, like you're not gonna have. I don't think I got stuck on any puzzles. The only thing that makes you kind of stuck on the puzzles is your own tension.
You're just
um,
like, oh shit, I want to hit that thing, like that kind of thing.
yeah, because the consequences of failing are pretty horrible. um, this game, I do want to mention something. This game does something so cool, and something I have not. I'm surprised I haven't seen in a lot of games. Is it times everything so everything you do feels like you just got in at the last second. Like every little piece, like do you know, like when you're like kind of like okay, if you're playing like a chase in a game, like oh my god, I'm gonna make it, and like sometimes you don't make it.
Yeah.
This one, it's like, but this one you do. Like it's like every little thing you do, they time it just perfectly, so you just barely make it, which is really cool. And it like every single like time, there's a lot of timing with like time puzzles and stuff
Uh
like
huh.
that, and it it wasn't difficult. Like I never had trouble with the timing, but like every time it just felt like I just barely scraped through. And I don't know how they did it. I don't know if they like timed it because it seems timed perfectly, but it's still there's still some amount of forgiveness there. But man, it is very cool. Some of the scenes that they do and some of the it's hard to talk about. The cool stuff is really hard to not spoil because it goes in some super weird stuff. Especially like near the final act, it gets very strange.
Mm, I
Yeah,
should probably play this.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, it was worth every penny. There is no question in my mind. You could probably play through this in one sitting. It's a little bit longer than Limbo, so I think it's like 4 or 5 hours. Just kind of know that going into it, it's a little bit longer. So if you just don't really expect to get through in one sitting like you could with Limbo. I guess last thing, I think the puzzles weren't super challenging and they weren't super interesting. I think in the context of the atmosphere, they're interesting, like the consequences for failing a puzzle or what you're doing or the story context around the puzzle is interesting, while the puzzle itself isn't. Um,
So it's almost like the puzzle is just a distraction to keep you interested in the environment.
yeah, exactly. It's just something that kind of keeps you. Yeah, it's kind of like it's a moment to just keep the game like interesting because if you just walk through the environment, you just be walking like you'd have
Yeah.
no agency over what's going on. So it does give you like a little bit of agency, and so that's like literally my only knock against the game is that it's a little bit easy, but like it doesn't really matter because right now I'm actually having trouble finishing Bound because I find Bound is like way too easy and it's just not very interesting to me. While this one is just like every night, like I played that game. I played it through with my girlfriend. She's like, "Are we playing inside?" I was like, "I guess," because it's a great viewer game because it's there's so much going on. It's a good one to play with somebody, I think.
Awesome. Well, get inside if you haven't already, because it's September and it came out in August. So if you're like me
Yeah,
and you were lazy as shit and cheap and you haven't bought it yet, apparently we should go buy it. So I might go do that.
yeah,
So you should.
I highly recommend it. I don't think it's God's greatest gift to man, though. I think it's very interesting, though.
So
I think it's just
game of the year.
Witness. Easy.
Your line puzzles.
No,
Anyway.
I'm so easy. Witness. Yeah.
Anyway, go get a piece of paper and do some line puzzles or play inside, your choice. But this has been Workforce Gaming. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter at Workforce Gaming, subscribe to us on iTunes, wherever you happen to be listening, and we will see you later.
Bye.